Hello, my name is Joshua Erpenbeck, and this is my presentation on my proposal to solve nuclear fusion. What is nuclear fusion? Nuclear fusion is an atomic reaction where two hydrogen isotopes, deuterium and tritium to be exact, fuse into a single helium atom. And during this process, mass is lost. There is less output mass than there was input mass. The lost mass was turned into energy, and if we were able to harness this energy, we could then convert it into electricity. And the process of nuclear fusion is shown in the picture below. Why do we want fusion? Well, it's considered an ideal energy source. It would give us an unlimited amount of clean energy while giving us zero negative consequences. And the reason why it can give us an unlimited amount of energy is because the input material is extremely abundant. The hydrogen isotopes can be found in seawater, and since we basically have an unlimited amount of seawater, we can therefore create basically an unlimited amount of energy. And in the picture below, it shows the process that a fusion reactor would use to convert the hydrogen isotopes into electricity. So, what's the problem with fusion? The problem is we can't harness it. We cannot create a reactor that produces practical and efficient energy. This has been due to three reasons. The first reason, which is almost insignificant, is heat. The second reason, which is kind of important, are the materials. And the third reason, which is very important, is deficient pressure. So why are these problems? When creating a fusion reaction, a temperature of 100 million degrees Kelvin is required. This isn't impossible, but it can be fairly challenging. And when you're dealing with such high temperatures, the materials used must be extremely strong. And the stronger that they are, the longer the reactor can maintain fusion, which will then lead to more energy. And for the actual fusion reaction to take place, the pressure must be very intense. It must be so strong that it can squeeze hydrogen isotopes to within 1 times 10 to the negative 15th meters of each other. The first attempt to solve fusion is a magnetic confinement reactor, and this is also known as a tokamak. A tokamak uses a magnetic field to squeeze plasma into a donut-based chamber, and this is where the actual reaction will take place. However, the tokamak does not feature the strongest materials or the strongest magnetic field strength. So, as a result of these two things, it cannot create practical and efficient energy. Second attempt to solve fusion is an inertial confinement reactor, and this is also known as a laser reactor. And as you can tell by its name, it uses high-powered lasers, but it also uses ion beams. The implemented use of both these pressure creators are used to heat a hydrogen pellet, which causes it to implode and then fuse. However, like the tokamak, it cannot create enough pressure to sustain a fusion reaction, and as a result of this, it's a reactor that cannot produce practical and efficient energy. And in the picture shown below is a picture of the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory Inertial Confinement Reactor, which is located in Southern California. My proposal to solve fusion. So what I've learned from these previous attempts is the main reason we cannot produce practical and efficient energy is due to pressure. So my solution is to create as much pressure as possible. I'm going to implement the use of magnets, lasers, and ion beams into a single reactor. And combining this with high-quality materials will create and sustain an unprecedented amount of pressure. So what are the components I'm going to need? The three things I'm going to need is I'm going to need the intense heat. I'm going to need the 100 million degrees Kelvin. I'm also going to need superior materials to help withstand the fusion reaction. And since I'm combining the use of pressure creators, I'm going to shoot for a reactor that can compress hydrogen isotopes to within 1 times 10 to the negative 17th meters of each other. This is even closer than previous reactors. Heat. So as I mentioned earlier, heat is kind of an insignificant problem. So I'm going to continue using the same heat-producing methods that are used today. And those are the neutral beam injections and high-frequency electromagnetic waves, which are basically gamma rays. And for materials, I think there are two materials that can be improved upon to help withstand and sustain a longer fusion reaction. The first one is the magnetic chamber. Since the magnetic chamber deals with electricity, it wants to conduct as much electricity as possible to create as much energy as possible. So I think adding silver and aluminum alongside the already existing copper would be very beneficial because it will help conduct more electricity. The second material is beryllium. I think that beryllium could be added to the blanket module, and as a result of this, the blanket module will be more efficient. The job of the blanket module is to absorb heat, and since beryllium is a material that is great at absorbing heat, now the blanket module will be even better at its job. And for pressure, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to implement the use of magnets, lasers, and ion beams with the hope of suppressing the hydrogen isotopes to within 1 × 10 to the negative 17th meters of each other. And to do this, I have to redesign the reactor so that there's more volume at the top and bottom to insert the lasers and ion beams. The magnetic chamber runs around the outer rim, as you can see here. So adding the lasers and ion beams at the top and bottom won't affect the magnetic chamber, and the pressure will all be combined here where the reaction will take place. So why is my solution superior to others? I directly address the problem. I take the main problem of deficient pressure, and I'm creating as much pressure as I possibly can. Next part is I'm assembling something that's already made of created parts. I'm not inventing anything new. So it'll be cheap, and not only that, it should be a fairly quick process. And this is feasible because the insertion of lasers and ion beams will not cause interference with the magnetic chamber. As I stated before, the magnetic chamber runs around the outer rim, and the lasers and ion beams will go at the top and bottom. And not only that, but the installation of other materials will not cause problems. The beryllium, beryllium, silver, and aluminum will be easy to install due to its malleability. And these components and materials can be easily attained. And as I said earlier, nothing new is being created, and as a result of that, this will all be relatively cheap. So, what is my conclusion? Fusion is the ideal energy source. However, we can't really harness it because of heat, materials, and pressure. And if we were able to harness it, the world would never undergo an energy crisis again, and the world would be safe. So, the world really needs fusion. If we were able to get fusion, the world would see a change that would just be so great. Energy would never, ever be a problem again. And these are the sources that I used.